Hello, and welcome to this Thrive Today webinar, Unlock Your Healing. My name is Christy Herring. I'll be your host for our time together. And I am just so glad that you are with us, whether you're joining us live or you're watching this on recording. So we live in an imperfect world. We all have wounds and pains from our past, and we're all to some extent on our own journey of receiving healing and growing in wholeness. And the good news is that there are a lot of resources out there to help us on these journeys, but sometimes even with the very best resources, even if we're giving everything we have to give of our time and our money and our energy, sometimes we can feel like we're just bumping up against a wall and not getting the breakthrough that we want in certain areas of our lives. So we're going to have a conversation with our president, Chris Coursey, today about this. And not only is Chris Coursey the co-founder of Thrive Today and the creator of our 5-day relational skill training, but he also has over 2 decades of experience in counseling people through some of the most difficult situations that you can imagine. And one of the things Chris has learned through all of this is that while strategies and tools and techniques are really important and matter, sometimes if we're missing key foundational skills, even the best strategies can fall short. And so we're going to talk about a couple key relational skills today that have the potential to unlock things for us and get us moving forward in our healing journeys where we might have been stuck. So I'm going to say a quick hello to Chris. Chris, we're so glad that you're with us today, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation together.
Thank you, Christy. I am thrilled for the time today. These are topics I think will resonate with all of us at some level. So looking forward to this time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always so much fun to talk about these things. And I just always receive so much insight myself. And I'm excited to have our viewers really receive some more insight from you as well. So before we get started, I do want to mention that we're going to have a question and answer time at the end of our time together. So if you have questions along the way, just put them into the Q&A box on Zoom. We are also recording this, so if you registered for the webinar, you're going to receive a recording of this. Now, if you're on Facebook Live with us, I should mention that if you want to receive the recording or you want to be a part of the Q&A, you're going to have to register for the webinar and hop onto Zoom with us. We're not actually going to be streaming the Q&A in Facebook. So just wanted to mention that to you. So Chris, let's get started. I know you have walked through countless people through really painful situations. And I just was wondering, what are the main factors that you've noticed that actually contribute to someone getting stuck in their journey of healing?
You know, that is such a good question. I started out working with survivors of severe abuse, many who couldn't sit through a church message, and many who, couldn't hold down a job. Everything was hard. Capacity was low. And I've had the pleasure of growing up amidst some of the tall trees in the forest, like Dr. Jim Wilder, Dr. Carl Lehman, Marcus Warner, just these amazing guys and gals who are just really pioneers. So a lot of what I'm sharing, I have to say, I've learned just in a sense in my own desperation of trying to find tools to help. And so for most of my ministry career, I've actually been really working on helping people to learn relational skills. And there's certain relational skills that are very helpful. And there's certain that when they're missing, they're going to show up. So what are some of those things or those factors that, really contribute to someone getting stuck? I think words just don't do justice to how hard it can be when you feel stuck in your healing journey. I've sat with people in just the pits of hopeless despair where they feel like they've done everything. They've traveled the world looking for resources, going to conferences, and they still feel like their feet are glued in concrete blocks and they just can't run the race that they want to run. So all too often, what happens is my pain is bigger than my ability to manage what I feel. So whenever my pain is bigger than my what we'd call my capacity, how well I can stay myself while I feel these feelings, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be just certain things you're going to see. And one of the things you're going to see when the pain is louder than my ability to manage it is I'm not going to be able to stay myself very well. And so a lot of the time people have the motivation, they have the faith, they have the intentions, but those things are no match for what's missing. And often what's missing is just the capacity. And so that capacity is just foundational. It's like when Jesus was telling the disciples some things that are going to come around the corner in the future, and he stops mid-sentence and he says, I have more to tell you, but you can't bear it right now. So Jesus was actually respecting their capacity. And he said, but when the Spirit of truth comes, he'll guide you into all truth. So there's capacity is foundational here when we think about the healing process. So I can have that desire, but I just don't have the capacity. And I see that a lot in those of us who have been in our healing journeys in some way, shape, or form. And one of the more common reasons why people are stuck is they just don't have the skills. And so there's certain skills that our brain needs and our brain will use while we're in this process of healing. One of them is just quiet. Believe it or not, quieting is just a foundational skill that's often, I guess we could say it's minimized because it doesn't feel like we're being productive when we're quieting or we're resting. But one of the best things I could do when I'm working with people is help them be able to take a breather, help them be able to rest, and then just building some joy. Part of building capacity, Christy, is just building joy. So I can remember when I would see people, it would be a two-prong approach. We're going to help get the rocks out of your shoe with what you and Jesus can handle today, what you can handle with Jesus's help. But I also knew they needed to build some joy and some capacity that would also happen outside of this ministry session. This was one of the big reasons Jim Wilder would have clients start the recovery ministry time once they got 5 people who would pray for them. So Jim wanted them to have community in place by the time they're going to start working on getting those rocks out of the shoe. So just recognizing we need that joy. And we also need to learn how to return to joy. So one of the reasons I'm stuck in my healing is because I've gotten all this healing over here for what I can manage and what I'm able to get back to joy from, a lot of those emotions. But there's this stuff over here, it just feels too big. And it's too big because I either don't have the capacity, I don't have the ability to quiet, or I don't have the ability to recover when the files are loaded. And so what happens is I just kind of decompensate because all the pain files are activated. But I don't have the ability to get back to joy from a lot of these emotions that are woven throughout this pain package. So helping people learn, how do I grow joy? How do I get back to joy? And then, of course, as a pastor, one of my favorite things is just helping people be able to see some of what God sees. And so where is Jesus in the midst of this hard stuff? And as I'm able to start connecting with Jesus and his peace in the hard stuff, I'm finding words to explain it. And I'm finding, in a sense, some ways of understanding and having a narrative for even how to make sense out of this. So our brain's always trying to make sense out of the hard stuff. So as we're working in our healing, we're also finding God's peace in the hard stuff, and we're finding ways to try to make sense out of some of the craziness that's there. So lack of practice, lack of relational skills can really hinder my growth. Lack of connection, lack of people, even the great Moses needed Aaron and Hur to hold up his arms while Israel was at battle. So we need other people to come around side of us while we're in this journey. So Christy, those are just a few things. There's more, but I would say those are some of the big common reasons I see why people are stuck. They've got the motivation, they're motivated, they just want to plow through all the hard stuff and put it behind them in the rearview mirror, but they don't have either the skills, the resources, the bandwidth to be able to actually effectively move forward.
Wow. Well, we are going to have more webinars because there is so much to unpack here. We're going to unpack a little bit of what you've been talking about, but as you're talking, I'm like, oh, we really have to do more of these.
Yes.
To touch on more of what you've spoken about. But the thing that also comes to mind is just, I guess, framing as you're talking, I'm thinking we need to have a healthy perspective that this is a long-term thing. Growing and healing, as you're talking, developing these things is going to take time. And sometimes we just want a quick fix. We want to go, just give me a tool, let me insert the tool, I get the result that I want, wham, bam, it's done. And so I think framing it so that we understand that this is a process, and to be patient with ourselves in the process would really help set someone up for success as well, especially with the conversation that we're having today about developing relational skills.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I'm thankful for this time, because what it does is it gives us a language. A lot of the times we know intuitively certain things are needed, but we don't always know what exactly they are. So one of the things I appreciate about having the language for the 19 skills is it gives us some framework, and it's a kind of hopeful, because it's like, oh, this is why I'm stuck. I'm not getting back to joy from my hopeless despair. Well, that's something I can work on. So I hope that our friends who are with us today and who will watch this later will actually find some hope in this, because it's providing a language and just to help people know these tools are accessible. We can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing is, even just working on one skill a little bit will make a difference. Getting the language, getting the awareness, and then starting to plug away at developing it. So we're going to talk about one of our relational skills. So Chris, in your book, The Joy Switch, you talk a lot about how getting our relational brain on is foundational to so much of our relational life. And so this is skill 0, the ability to activate the relational part of our brain. So can you briefly share a little bit more about skill 0 and why this ability to get our relational brain going is so important to receiving healing from pains and wounds of our past?
Yeah, one of the what I consider a breakthrough in brain science is really the work that Wilder and Lehman have really fleshed out, which is that we have this relational circuit breaker on the right side of our brain. And ideally, this relational circuit, we all call it, is the switch that comes on when I'm expecting some joy. So when I'm anticipating my sons are getting home from school, I can't wait, I can hear the garage open, Jen's walking in the house. This would be the part of my brain that comes on and goes, ooh, I'm going to see some of my people and I can't wait. And so there's also this other thing that happens with this circuit breaker is it goes off what Jim Wilder would call enemy mode. It goes into enemy mode. And in enemy mode, the people that I care about feel more like enemies. So I want to get away from those family members that are coming home because I just want to be away, or I need to focus on a project or whatever it is. I'm just offline. And the beauty of this language here is you can recognize if I am in my relational sweet spot, as I call it in the book, or if I'm in enemy mode. And so when I can't manage what I'm feeling, I slip into enemy mode. And in enemy mode, I lose all this rich blanket of relational skills and my capacity. All of that stuff temporarily just goes dark. And so I'm not a very good version of myself in enemy mode. And so this is very relevant for the healing process, because one of the first things I'm going to teach someone is how to recognize when they're in their relational sweet spot or when they slip into enemy mode, and have a language as well as a little bit of practice. So I know, wow, I think I'm losing it here. So if I'm working with someone and they have a sense of Jesus and his peace in this place, and suddenly their attention shifts to something else in this memory and they kind of lose their peace, I would say, I think we're slipping into enemy mode here, because do you have a sense as to where the peace is and where Jesus is in this? Like, well, no, he was here, but now I'm focused on this. So we can learn how to navigate that terrain. And so how to live with our relational circuit intact, working, and how to build the capacity so that I can better stay my relational self and suffer well when things go wrong or when things become hard. So ideally in relational mode, I can actually start quieting my big feelings. I can start to build some joy. I'm not going to build joy in enemy mode. So actually we have to help those that we're working with, or those of us who are just in our healing journey as well. We learn what it feels like to stay relational and to be more relational when things go wrong rather than just kind of relationally decompensating. So I know that skill 0 is not there because I just don't have the capacity, right? So for example, I didn't sleep much last night. It was a very short night. And I'm noticing this morning, I didn't have capacity for things that would normally just roll off my shoulders. Encountered a bad driver on the way of taking my sons to school. But what was good is we have a language for that. So I can tell my sons, daddy slipped into enemy mode when that driver did this. But what should we do when we slip into enemy mode? I say, well, Dad, we got to get back into relational mode. Okay, how would I get back into relational mode? And so we have this language to understand that in the healing process. My goal is to learn to get back into relational mode faster and faster. Nothing good's going to grow in enemy mode other than weeds. And we want to grow the good stuff in our relational garden. So capacity is a big issue. I notice in enemy mode, I lose my peace. So there's a lack of peace. There's a lack of having a sense of God's peace and presence with me. In enemy mode, one of the things that I notice is I can't put myself in your shoes. For one, I probably don't care how you're feeling, but I'm not able to really put myself in your shoes. So you just say, Chris, you're cold right now. You're uncaring. Don't you care that this is happening? In relational mode, that compassion is there. But in enemy mode, it's gone. And so I lose my compassion for myself or for others when I'm in enemy mode. So we also will notice that we have a hard time shifting our attention in enemy mode. So in enemy mode, we're locked on to whatever's bothering us, whatever's just, robbing our joy. So again, I want to help you build capacity so that you stay in relational mode longer, more effectively, because you are going to go into enemy mode. It's not if, it's when. It's going to happen, but we want to shorten that span of being stuck in enemy mode and get back into our sweet spot. And one of the things, the byproducts of unresolved pain is I just feel like I'm perpetually in enemy mode. So when this unprocessed pain file is activated and those feelings are front and center, what happens is I just feel like I'm kind of perpetually in enemy mode. You just see that I'm always mad. I'm always worried. I'm always stuck in maybe feeling hopeless despair, whatever it is. So that's why we call this skill 0 of the 19 skills. This is like the foundational. This is what we can also call the master switch, that you get this switchboard turned on. Now you're going to be able to better learn these relational skills, stay in your relational sweet spot, build capacity to suffer well. And one of the beautiful things about Jesus and how he handled the hard stuff in his ministry is he remembered who he was. Like he remembered who he was and what was important. And one of the unfortunate byproducts of enemy mode is we kind of forget who we are and we forget what's important. So big step for counselors and coaches out there and anyone in their healing journey is really practice learning to stay in relational mode, minimizing your time in enemy mode, have the language, ask for help, get prayer, build that relational system where people remind me who I am anytime I forget. And honestly, right there, that foundational skill provides the bedrock that you can build your relational house on, especially your healing journey.
That's really helpful. And as you were talking, I kind of this picture come to mind, so say somebody, they're going to go spend some time with Jesus to try to work through some pain that they're in, or they're going to go spend some time with a counselor. That if, let's say I'm going to go do that, if I'm in enemy mode versus relational mode, it's kind of like getting into a car and the engine might be on, I might be able to get it into drive, but I've got mud under my tires and I'm just going to spin my tires and not really get anywhere, because this is like the foundational piece. You need to have solid ground you're driving on. And if we're in enemy mode, we don't have solid ground under us. We've got mud under us and we're just going to spin our wheels with what we're doing.
Yeah. And that's so hard. That I think, Chrissy, you put words to what a lot of us feel. And that's a pretty tough place to be when you've spent some time there feeling like those wheels are just spinning in the mud.
Yeah. But the great news is, just understanding this concept of relational circuits. I mean, we've heard from other counselors that are using this with people, and it's shifting things in really huge ways for their clients. Because even just the understanding of it is starting to give people some breakthroughs.
Yeah, that's right. It's huge.
So the second skill that we want to touch on is skill 1, which is building joy. So can you talk to us a little bit about this skill and how this skill makes an impact for us when we are walking through pains and wounds?
Yeah, this is another really big one and so valuable. So with skill 0, what skill 0 does is it activates all the circuitry so that I'm now available. I'm in my sweet spot. And skill 1 is what I'm in the sweet spot for, which is glad to be together, joy. So, God has designed our relational brain to run on the fuel of joy. This is where we have people who are glad to be with us in the good times as well as the bad times. And when I first started working with severely traumatized people, I actually lived in a redemptive community with some of my colleagues. So like we shared life with these precious ones who life had been really hard. And one of the things that was really fun to watch and transformational is what happened when they started to experience people just being glad to see them, even though it might be a bad day. They knew that no matter what happens, these people are going to be glad to be with me. Even if they can't fix me, they're still glad to be with me. And what that does is that really kind of charges our relational battery. And what that does is that gives us strength and capacity to suffer well when things go wrong. So it's like you have the safety net. So I liked your picture, Christy, of like wheels spinning in the mud and we're just kind of stuck. So what skill 1 does is it's the tow truck. And the tow truck comes up and it can pull the car out of that mud to get us on dry ground so that we can actually drive and go somewhere. So this is just having the people, the family, the community who are glad to be with me, even if they don't know, how to help me. And I found with a lot of counselors, there's times they don't know how to help people. There's some really tough stuff. And they'll say, I don't know what I'm doing. But what they are doing, as I listen to their story, is they're building joy with these precious ones that they're serving. So when people see them, they know that there's going to be someone here who's glad to be with me, glad to see me, glad to hear me. And that just bolsters our capacity so that we can better navigate the hard stuff. So I found this 2-prong approach here, working with people with really, hard stuff in life. One was, we're going to get the rocks out of the shoe, and how well that process went really was based on how much capacity, how much they could handle at a given moment and still be themselves. But I also knew, as I said earlier, the other thing we're going to work on is building that relational joy, that safety net, and helping people to build those relationships. And it's, again, people who are glad to be with me. We share stories, we fellowship, we interact. We have meals together. There is just this glad to be together. And one of the things that happens is this gives me strength to effectively manage what I'm feeling. And so joy becomes like this relational home base for our nervous system, and that we can just do hard stuff throughout the day, but we're always coming back to this home base. I kind of liken it to, people, when I'm growing joy actively, then it's actually helping me to address and deal with and better manage my fear. And so when joy is low, my fear and my pain is louder. And when fear is running the system, like I'm afraid of the sun setting because I don't know if it's going to come back. But with joy, I don't have to be afraid of the sun setting because my experience is it comes back in the morning. And so what that means is we have people who we can count on to be glad to be with us or help us to return to joy when we're not glad to be together. And my friend Ed Corey came up with a really helpful term called beeps. And so beeps is what happens when those joy levels start to sink, dangerously low levels. So that means it's harder for me to manage what I'm feeling. And we're all highly motivated to kind of make pain stop and find some kind of reprieve in the midst of our upset. So beeps are just the behaviors the events, the experiences, the people, and the substances that are kind of artificial joy, or what we might prefer to call pseudo joy. So if I'm not growing the real thing, I will go after the quick fixes to try to find that relief. So joy gives us lots and lots of strength. One of the things I really appreciated that Jim Wilder taught me years ago is how Shepherd's House used to, when they had people who were highly suicidal, they would have them go to nursing homes and visit the elderly, because they knew, you ever walk through a nursing home, people are glad to see you. They're glad to see someone, and especially someone who would stop to talk to them. And there's just a lot of joy with these sweet folks there. And they started to have people who were suicidal start to build joy by visiting nursing homes. One of the things that happened is their suicidality rate started to sink and started to drop. And so I've applied that a lot through my ministry, working with people. Like, there's sometimes we just need to build joy. And that actually is a very good thing to do for your healing process. And it's easy to underestimate, because sometimes we just want to get through all the hard stuff and just like put it in our rearview mirror. But as you said, Christy, sometimes, we need to actually grow some capacity, build some joy, which gives me the reserve, gives me the strength and the bandwidth to better deal with the hard stuff and learn how to stay myself while I work through some of this hard stuff. So joy is really skill one, is what we call it. Foundational skill that we have woven throughout all of our training programs, our resources. We all need joy, no matter where we are. We all need joy, to give and receive some joy. That is foundational for our healing journeys.
And I wonder if that even takes a shift in thinking, Chris, because I'm thinking a lot of people probably think, I can't really have joy until I work through this issue that's causing me pain. But you're saying the opposite. To actually work through the pain, we need to build some joy to give capacity to be able to process the pain, which might be a shift in thinking for some people today.
You know what? It is. And I'm glad you said that, because it is a whole new way of looking at things. I've worked with, people in pain are highly motivated. Like, I'm really highly motivated to make my pain stop and to turn down the volume. But it is a whole different paradigm to think through, like, wow, building joy, proactively building joy is actually going to give me more bandwidth to further and deepen my healing than it would otherwise. So there's times with people, even I've watched Jesus tell people, like, look, this is enough. We're not going to do any more on this painful stuff. Now you need to build some joy before we can do this. And so pretty amazing. It's a very interesting, helpful lens to have, that, we all need to recharge our batteries and deepen that reserve of joy to help get us farther down the road in our healing.
Yeah. Well, we talked yesterday. I wanted you to touch on this. So you're bringing up the issue of capacity quite a bit. So we're talking about building capacity so that we can go to these difficult places. And you were talking a little bit about the difference between skill 0 and skill 1, especially in terms of capacity. Can you share with our audience what you were sharing with me yesterday? I found it really helpful.
Yeah, it's really helpful to tease some of these things out with, how does skill 0 fit with the relational circuits? How does skill 1 fit with joy? So in a sense, we can look at it this way, like, skill 0 gives me strength right now to better navigate what I'm feeling. So I know I just slipped into enemy mode. I'm wanting to blast you. We're not going to get back to joy here. So I better take a moment, get relational, and then I can, so getting relational in the moment when we're interacting with people helps us to have some bandwidth to deal with things in that moment. What skill 1 does, which is the glad to be together joy, this gives me strength for the long haul, in the big picture. So I can stay relational longer, better, under changing conditions. I can better be my relational self, no matter what I'm feeling, no matter what's going on. And so we need both. And so I like to put it like, right now, do what you can to get out of enemy mode so you're not blasting people or just like shutting down. Because some of us are high energy responders when we're offline. we just want to blast everybody. Some of us are low energy responders. We want to beat ourselves up. No matter what, the goal is I want to get relational, but in the big picture, what can I do proactively to grow some joy, to expand my joy, to increase my joy, so that I can actually have more capacity in the long haul. So relational circuits, more capacity now. I need it. That's good. Joy, more capacity for the long haul, big picture. They work together. We need both.
That's great. Thank you. I found that really helpful. And so I've got a tough question for you. This one popped in my head, but I know some people might be asking it. So because we're talking about capacity, and the reality is essentially what you're saying is sometimes the tough stuff in our life, we just don't have the capacity to deal with it. It's actually too much. Yeah. But a lot of people throw around this idea, well, God will never give me more than I can handle. And they're coming from, in 1 Corinthians, it talks about he won't let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. And so a lot of people have taken that and expanded it to this bigger sense. Well, he will never give you more than you can handle. Just, can you talk to us about that mindset a little and how you would perceive that statement?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because if I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, I can go out and try to lift up my car, right? Because the Bible says I can do all things. You can't do that, right? Chris? I can't. I've got my willpower. I can't do it. And so the good news here, though, with this understanding and this lens, is we have a God who's always with us, who never leaves us nor forsakes us. And that is good news. There's only so much weight we all can carry before we break, before something snaps, something gives. And so, what my colleagues and I would say is really try to help people live relationally, right? How to help people live relationally, so I'm aware of God's peace and God's presence, no matter what's going on. And so even, God, through Christ, I can do all things, and God is always with me. It doesn't mean that I can just go out and, lift up my car. So we have to grow some capacity. And there's another verse I often would hear, like, leave what's in the past, right? Like where Paul talks about just putting all that behind. Like, well, actually, Paul's talking about accomplishments. He's not talking about the rocks in the shoe. So if we have rocks in our shoes, we do need to remove those rocks. And what we're trying to help people learn, and my colleagues as well, is just how to help people live relationally with a sense and awareness of God's presence, but staying mindful you are breakable. We all are breakable. We all have limitations. In fact, that's one of the things that happens with trauma, is something's too big, I'm too small. And so Jesus never told us that nothing bad would happen to us. He did say he would be with us. He would be with us. And Peter says, don't be surprised when those fiery trials show up on your doorstep. So the key that I hope everybody hears today is that we can learn to live relationally with our community, our people, but also with Jesus. And so the good news is Jesus is with us. And as we live that reality, we do grow capacity to suffer well and to better stay ourselves. But we all forget who we are sometimes, Christy, and we need each other to bring us back when we do forget.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think I mentioned it, I don't know if it was in a webinar or an event, but one of the things God's been dealing with me a lot is just taking away the anxiety, that when we face things that feel too big, or we face things that we think aren't going to change, that anxiety that we feel over it sometimes is one of our biggest blocks to being able to walk through it. And so what you're talking about, knowing Jesus is with me, knowing he's not scared about what I'm facing, knowing that we shouldn't be surprised if things feel too big at times, if they're too much, and to know that he's got a pathway for us to grow our capacity so that we can get stronger. All of that helps diffuse the anxiety, and so that we can find that peace in the middle of it. So
yeah, that's good. And that's good news, honestly. And I think it's helpful to really clarify that for people. I've often heard Jim Wilder just say how we're as good as our ability to, to manage what we feel. And what I often fear is how I'm going to feel when things go wrong. So Yeah, teasing these things out. It's easy to spiritualize things that just weren't meant or intended to be spiritualized. So I'm always glad when we can add a little bit to some of that stuff.
Yeah. So last question I have for you before we move on. We do have a lot of counselors, a lot of coaches that join us for these webinars. And just wondering if you have any advice for them as far as tips you would give them for using these two skills we've talked about in their practices to help their clients.
Yes, good question. So I think one of the best pieces of advice I could give my counselor and coach friends would be to, normalize these skills in your own life. If you learn these skills and practice these skills, they will show up. If you don't, if you try to use them as just a means to an end, but you're not actually practicing this stuff, you're not going to effectively help other people or train other people to do it. So take ownership over these in your own life. Practice with people. Even though I've trained relational skills for over 20 years, I still have to practice this stuff with my wife, my family, and my friends. Like, I can get relationally flabby if I'm not working these skills. So we all can, and we all need practice. So normalize the skills. Provide a language for those that you're serving. It helps to have a language, because a lot of us, when we've been in the healing journey, we might look at other people who seem like they've just had this amazing healing, and we go, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I have what they have? And we don't always know how to interpret that, or we get faulty interpretations. So I would say providing the language actually provides some hope that there's something I can do. There's some skills I can learn that will help me get my feet under me for the good as well as the hard stuff. And so to effectively equip people, you have to practice this yourself. You can practice exercises with those that you serve. One of my favorite things working with people and their support team is walking them through exercises where they're practicing this stuff and they're growing capacity and they're learning these recovery skills. There's a lot of practical things that coaches and counselors can do, like stories. Stories are one of the best ways to transmit a lot of these important relational skills. So I find when I'm working with people, I tell lots of return to joy stories, or staying my relational self, or where I've failed and how, what I've learned now. Stories are so good. And that's a very practical, essential tool that you can add to your tool belt. And those stories will go a long way. And just encouraging people that these things do take time, Christy, just as you mentioned at the beginning, like these things do take time. And I love that God recognizes capacity, because like a lot of us we just want to push through it all, get through it, put it behind me. But God actually is mindful that we are breakable. And I like to remind God that I'm breakable every now and then. So it's a good thing. That means that we have limitations, but there are practical things we all can do to grow the capacity and the strength to suffer well when things go wrong, and hold on to God's peace no matter what's going on.
Well, I felt like just a touch of encouragement. You said that, and just thinking in my own life, I still am, but I was so broken. I was like a leaf that got blown over so easily, and just how good God has been to give me strength through the years and build me up so that I can walk through difficult things and stay myself. I'm like, it's amazing.
It is. It's wonderful.
It's so encouraging. So I just want to say, if you are someone out there who tends to get knocked down really easily, you have a hard time getting back up, things can keep you down for days, I just want you to know there's hope. Like, that was me. I could get knocked down for days over something I said and worrying about how it might have been taken the wrong way. And God has just done a total transformation in my life. And so these skills work. They do strengthen us. Jesus is good. So we hope you have some hope here. So we are going to dive into our Q&A in a minute. First, I do want to mention that if you are on Facebook Live in a minute, we're going to be stopping the feed. So you want to hop on to Zoom with us if you want to take part of our Q&A. And I'm going to actually go ahead and share some resources with you, because if any of this is resonating with you and we just want to give you next steps. How do you actually develop these skills that we're talking about? That is why we exist, is to help you see where you might have gaps and then provide the resources you need to develop these skills. So Chris has a book that we already mentioned, The Joy Switch. This is one of the best ways to develop your ability to get your relational circuits on. So he fleshes out what the relational brain is, how to recognize it, if it's on or off. This is loaded with exercises to help you practice, and the practices will help you gain more awareness, help you gain your ability to get your relational circuits on. So this would be a really great start, especially for Skill Zero. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, and just encouraging people. What my goal with some of the stuff is just to make it accessible, practical, with exercises. There's a reason, we joke, Christy, that, our team, that we're the practice people, because we really want people to practice. I just, really want to give the shout out to my colleagues as well. They have amazing resources that flesh this stuff out even more so. The work of Wilder and Carl Lehman. But our hope here is just making it accessible and practical that I can do today with my friends or with my family. Like, that's really what I hope people walk away with as they look at some of these resources here.
Yeah. And this is a real easy read, and it's short. And I think someone had requested a book they could fit in their back pocket, Chris, and that's what you gave them. So that's what this is. It's just a really great starting point. Now, if you're wanting to go just a little bit deeper, I encourage you to go to thrivetoday.org/foundational5. We have resources on our foundational 5 relational skills. And so the first 2 of those are skill 0 and skill 1. And when you go to this page, you'll see that we kind of have a pathway for you to develop these skills. So we have a free webinar, which is just going to flesh out a little bit more about what this skill is, what it looks like. And then we have a theory course where Chris goes more in depth in the brain science behind it, but he makes it really easy to understand. I know that word brain science can be a little intimidating. He makes it really understandable. And then he sprinkles some practices so you can get your feet wet with practicing. And then we have our practice courses, our skill practice courses. And this is where Chris is your coach. He comes alongside you and he leads you through several exercises so that you can be building your relational skill muscles or your joy muscles. And so he will go to the gym with you and help you practice these things. So we have these resources for skills 0 and skill 1 on this site, and that would just be a great way to develop these. And also want to mention that if you're newer around here or you want to just get a better picture of what the 19 relational skills are, and I encourage you to check out Transforming Fellowship. This is Chris's book where he has a chapter on each of the 19 relational skills, and it's just really helpful for understanding them better. He has some great stories and things like that. And of course, if you have any questions, if you go to our website, if you're not sure how to find what you're looking for, we are here to help you. So email us at info@thrivetoday.org, and we would love to assist you in finding the resources that are best for you. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to our Facebook friends. Thanks for being with us. And the rest of you on Zoom, we're going to go ahead and jump into our Q&A. Okay, so Chris, our first question is it when the right orbital prefrontal cortex is running smoothly that determines if we're in relational or enemy mode? In other words, is joy center and identity center the same thing?
Excellent question. So yes, the right orbital prefrontal cortex, which is right here on the right side behind my right eye. This is a key part of our relational circuit, but whether this part of the brain stays on or not comes down to what we call our level 3, which is our cingulate cortex. And so we call that level 3 because it's a key part of the relational circuit. In other words, if I can manage what I'm feeling, this level 4, the orbital prefrontal cortex, is running the show. So this is a part of my brain that remembers who I am and helps me to live and respond accordingly to who I know myself to be. And so when I go into enemy mode, unfortunately, that guy temporarily goes to sleep, goes offline. And then my level 3 is just kind of, the lights are dimmed at that point. So it's not clear who I am. I'm reactive. My self-preservation circuits are kind of running the show, which is using fear. So this is where the identity, like who we know ourselves to be, resides there. So it's very interesting to me that like this joy center is the same, shares a room in the house with our identity center, which, we're, if you think about it, joy is just, should be foundational for who we know ourselves to be. And we have a God who's glad to be with us. So this is all really good news.
Thank you, Chris. This one is just practical. Can you clarify on how these 19 skills we're talking about in the Joy Switch book correlate with the 19 skills on like our laminated skill card that we, let's see, they do not appear to be the same, but I know there must be a correlation between most of them.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's someone who's trying to, figure out how do these pieces fit. So we have 19 skills that we really focus on at Thrive Today. And these are just those relational skills I ideally learn and use in my life. So the relational circuit, what we would refer to as skill 0, that actually is like the foundation for all those skills. I don't know if it's on our skill cards or not. I don't know if we've
well, it's not
that.
On this one. So,
okay.
And I'll put this up. This is what, this is what he's referring to here. And yeah, so this one does not have it because initially we didn't talk about it in the same way.
Yeah, that's right. So they are related. What we're talking about today is skill 0, which in a sense is the foundation for all these 19 skills. We added the skill 0 a little bit later. We were already training 19 skills. And thanks to Carl Lehman and Jim, they were able to say, hey, wait a minute. There's this relational circuit that really sets the tone for what happens with these other skills. So that's when we realized, hey, we need skill 0. So it was, we realized it later, but they are related.
So they are the same 19 skills. I think there may have been some wording differences. There might be. I'm not entirely sure. And we added skill 0. So that would be the difference.
Yeah. Good.
But otherwise they are the same.
Yeah.
Thank you. Chris, what if you don't have a group to encourage you?
Yeah, that's a hard one. One of the things I tell people is when we feel alone in the hard stuff, those are the tough conditions for our brain to process what's going on. So it is really hard. I just want to validate that. It's hard when we don't have other people that would want to join us on this journey or even have the language that we could get together. I say a couple things. One is it's a good matter for prayer. I want to get Jesus' perspective and peace in this while I look for it. I love the story of Hagar. She thought she was going to die with her son because there's nothing to drink. And God kind of met her in that and said, well, there's some wells over here. Just look over here. And he helped her find those wells of water, which saved her life. And so for those of us, we feel like we're dying, we're withering, we don't have any joy or joyful people. Let's get some God peace and say, okay, Lord, help me to find those. One of the practical ways probably would be to just, consider doing a small group study and reaching out, inviting people to the study. And, just putting it out there. If you have a church, being able to do that. I mean, we live in a COVID world, so I know things are really hard under these conditions, but just trying to do what we can. My friend Amy Brown runs what's called journey groups, which are another great way to online be able to meet people. So ideally having some people in your community that you could meet face to face with would be a start. But get some peace from Jesus, and what would be some practical ways that he might lead us to find some of these people. But invite people to coffee and tea, all kinds of that good stuff.
Yeah.
There.
I'll try to find and put a link to the journey groups in the chat in a minute here. And also, looking at, we do have events throughout the year where we tend to have breakout rooms. So sometimes that's a way just to meet some people that are interested in these things. So you might want to keep your ear out for events that we have coming in 2022 and joining in, and can meet some people that way. So Chris, here's a question. I'm walking with a friend who's dying from Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's an incurable brain virus. It's already degenerative muscle control and loss of speech. I feel like I'm supposed to do unto others as I would have them do for me. So I'm trying to be present in this hard time. What might be a suggestion on how to speak hope into a seemingly hopeless scenario?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And things get real quickly when you start walking with people and they're dealing with some of this really life-altering challenges and trials. Yeah, I would similarly say, let's get some peace and perspective with Jesus. And I would look for inspiration, how to connect with them and help them get peace in the midst of that. I think that right there is probably one of the ways you can bring them some hope, is being able to connect with Jesus in the midst of it, in the midst of the hard stuff. I had a family one time, they were dealing with a life-altering ending difficulty with one of the family members. Before that, they were not receptive to anything I had to say about God and Jesus. But during that hardship, they were open to me praying with them, talking about God and his peace. And so if there's that receptivity, I would definitely look for the Prince of Peace to share some of that peace with them in the midst of the hard stuff. But I love the mindset there of being able to do what you would want done for you. I think that's beautiful. That's wise and mature, and being there, loving on them is just going to go a long way. So I just thank you for being willing to do that. Love never fails. Just love on them and see if they would be open to some of God's peace in the midst of this awful situation that they're navigating.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, like, especially in those kind of tough situations, a lot of people can't hang with them. Like, it's too much for them to be fully present. So like you said, just being with them is huge. We walked with a family as their son was dying from a degenerative disease. And it was just one of the things I think I remember is just, I had to take care of myself though, to be present for them, because I was feeling the pain and the grief at times. And so I needed to be all the more close to God to have what I needed, so then I could be a strength to them by taking care of myself at the same time. So anyway, giving yourself permission to do that, because that's a big thing that you've taken on. So
yes, that's wise.
Okay, so here's a question. Lack of connection, but I need it. There's a fear of behaving codependently, that others will be too needy and require too much from me, and vice versa. Impatient, intolerant of other idiosyncrasies. Any thoughts on this? And we have codependency coming up again for the third time this week.
Yeah, that's a big topic. And, I like to tell people that, look, there's a good reason for those feelings. Those feelings and reactions are breadcrumb trail to something. And so those are opportunities to find some of God's peace, and getting some of God's peace and some of his perspective on these things. Many of us, our brain remembers what it feels like to feel out of control or outside of our capacity. And so anything that reminds me of those moments, my survival circuit will have strong opinions about. So with that question would tell me probably some things that have probably reinforced what happens when I'm outside of my capacity. Something else is too big and I don't have what I need. So step by step, just growing some capacity, getting God's peace, and inviting Jesus, what should I know about these things? And are there places where I need his peace that I might not have his peace? Codependence is a tough thing. It's a fear-driven response, and it's also there for a good reason. So ultimately, what I'm trying to do is better manage what I feel. And my brain will do whatever it's learned to do, good, bad, or ugly. So I want to encourage people that we can actually grow that capacity and find those examples to help us know, how do I better manage what I feel? Because until I learn to manage what I feel, I will continue to do whatever I've learned to do, good, bad, or ugly. And in a sense, those are opportunities when I do those with other people, my brain's still looking, you show me how to do this. You show me how to manage this. So as I find as Christ followers in this world, we have lots of opportunities to help reflect back how God sees people, and also who did he design us to be, and what would that look like under these conditions? But we're always tender with our own weaknesses and limitations as well as those in other people. So yeah, just hold on to his peace and get his peace in those places where it might not quite yet be. Those are good, hard questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some of these things, there's no like simple, easy answer, but yeah, all of these things they sure help along the
Yes,
way.
they do.
So, Chris, someone's been studying brain skills with Jim Wilder and is a heart sync facilitator, has been for several years. I get an opportunity to start working in a safe house with human trafficked women who want out and are now Christian. I have your books. I've read Joy Skills, but not Transforming Fellowship. Do you have any specific advice for how to work with these women?
Yeah, I think the big thing that you can do here is helping to build capacity. That's also the missing piece here with a lot of recovery approaches. And, what we talked about today was really how some practical ways to grow capacity. So with a lot of these resources that you'll find through Thrive Today, there's lots of practice exercises. So I would say doing exercises with this group, this precious group who've just been through a lot of probably very hard, painful stuff. So help them grow capacity, help them to learn these skills so that they learn how to recover and better manage what they're feeling. That will go a long way. And you can do a lot of these exercises in groups with people. It builds joy, it builds capacity, and it actually, in a sense, helps my brain to learn, how do I deal with what I'm feeling here? And we start in a group, in a community, we have a more broad range of a diversity of skills. So getting people together who can share stories of how they've recovered when things went wrong, try to grow capacity and try to respect capacity when people are pushed outside of the bounds of what they can handle. It's time to rest. It's time to quiet. So giving them the lens and some language and the practice will go an incredibly long way.
I also want to mention we have a friend who wrote in a testimony who works in the same kind of situation that you're talking about, and she's had incredible results with doing a manual journaling with the women. So you can get more information from the Joyful Journey book, which you can find on Amazon. And I would also recommend checking out, we have some resources, a free webinar and an event on God's site. Because that feeds into the manual journaling a little bit, but she's just found that even people having Jesus see them, that's been really brought some huge breakthrough for some of the women.
Yeah, that's good.
So last question, Chris, can you speak to how the relational brain skills can help and be built by someone on the autism spectrum? And I have wondered about this myself. I just think there could be some good implications for that, but
yeah, the work of Alan Shore from UCLA goes into a lot of detail, especially in some of his newer books that talk about autism, and he approaches this from a relational perspective. So I would say with what you really have to try to do, whatever you do, you have to try to work it within the range of what the person can handle. And it's often very short, small, simple, ways of trying to grow capacity with what a person can handle. So your face, your voice is all very important. Your movements, your gestures. Think about it. Like, I have to learn to quiet. And the way that I learned to quiet is because you who know how to quiet help me. And my brain is wired to look at faces to see if you're glad to be with me. So probably one of the best things we can do is respect what those limits are in children or adults. Very short, simple, live in your face, low energy, voice tone, very soothing, low energy sounds. All of those things would go a long way. But it's easy to get overwhelmed. It's easy to be pushed too hard, too fast, too much. So I would probably say everything, small doses, but think about what creates the most soothing environment here. And I would try to create that environment. And any chance you get to interact with these precious ones, joy and rest, and that's not overwhelming. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I could give you that lens for, is just taking advantage of what people can handle and what they can, whatever they have available at a given moment, trying to build joy and rest within those limits. And you're planting seeds. It's like when we work with children, you don't always see the results immediately of what you're doing, but you're planting seeds with very small steps, and just trust that your good things are happening as you're planting those seeds. So that'd be my encouragement, I think, right there.
Really good. Thank you, Chris. Well, I wish we could get to all the questions that we have. We run out of time, but I do want to say I'm going to be sending out an email. It will have the recording. It will have some of the next steps that we shared with you. And you are welcome to email us. If your question didn't get answered, you can send an email to info@thrivetoday.org, and we would love to try to get an answer back to you if we're able. But Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you were really tired. I was really tired, but I so enjoyed our time together. And I just appreciate all your insights into this topic.
Well, thank you. And Christy, thank you for living and breathing this stuff. You're such a good example. I'm so glad you could share today. Thank you for doing this. And thank you, friends, for being here.
Yeah,
I'm so grateful for you. All of you represent a network and a community and a family. So as you embrace this stuff, good things will grow in that garden.
Yeah, we're so thankful to you all for joining us. We hope that this has been encouraging. Please send this to friends, to colleagues that you feel like would be encouraged by it. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend. If you're live with us, if you're watching this on recording, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.